The stars had become graveyards, and Captain Alara Vance stood on the bridge of humanity's final hope, watching death chase them through the void. The Ardent Hope was dying, and everyone aboard knew it. Smoke filled the corridors where repair crews worked with bleeding hands and desperate prayers. The engines screamed with each jump through space, their cores burning hotter than they were ever meant to burn. 12,000 souls huddled in cargo bays and cramped quarters, the last survivors of a species that once dreamed of conquering the cosmos. Behind them came the Vethkai Dominion. Alara gripped the command console as another impact shook the vessel. On the main screen, she could see them, hundreds of insectoid warships moving like a swarm of locusts through the darkness. Their hulls gleamed with the color of dried blood, and their weapons lit up the void with hungry fire. For 300 years, the Vethkai had hunted humanity across the galaxy. They had burned Earth until the oceans boiled. They had cracked open the colony worlds like eggs and devoured everyone inside. They called humans vermin, a plague to be wiped clean from existence. And now only the Ardent Hope remained. "Captain, the port engine is failing," Lieutenant Chun called out from his station, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We have maybe 6 more jumps before the whole system collapses." Alara turned to face her crewmen and women who had lost everything yet still stood at their posts. Navigator Yuki Tanaka worked the star charts with fingers that trembled but never stopped moving. Chief Engineer Marcus Cole shouted orders into his communicator, keeping the ship alive through sheer willpower. Weapons Officer David Park sat ready at his console, even though their guns had run dry 2 systems ago. These were the last soldiers of humanity, and Alara loved them with a fierce and terrible pride. "Find us somewhere to hide," she ordered. "Anywhere." Yuki's hands flew across her controls, scanning system after system. Most were Vethkai territory certain death. Others were barren rocks with no resources, no hope. Then her eyes went wide, and she leaned closer to her screen, as if she could not believe what she was seeing. "Captain, I found something strange," Yuki said slowly. "There's an uncharted planet at the edge of this sector. It is giving off energy readings that make no sense." "What kind of readings?" Alara asked. "I do not know how to explain it. The sensors say there is massive power beneath the surface, but the planet looks dead. No atmosphere, no life signs, nothing but black sand and rock. The Vethkai have no record of this world in any database we have captured." Marcus looked up from his station with doubt written on his face. "Could be a trap. Could be our only chance," Alara replied. She stared at the planet's coordinates on her screen. Everything about this felt wrong, an unknown world with impossible energy signatures, hidden at the edge of nowhere. But the Vethkai were closing in, and the Ardent Hope had nowhere else to run. Sometimes survival meant jumping into the dark and praying you would not hit the ground. "Set course for that planet," Alara commanded. "Maximum speed." The Ardent Hope groaned as it changed direction, its wounded engines pushing harder than they should. Behind them, the Vethkai swarm adjusted its path like a predator following wounded prey. They were faster, stronger, and they knew that this chase was almost over. Supreme Hierarch Zelvok watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Hunger. He was ancient by Vethkai standards, his carapace scarred from 1,000 conquests. He had personally overseen the burning of Earth, had watched the human homeworld crack and crumble beneath orbital bombardment. That had been a good day. "The vermin are running toward the dead zone," one of his officers clicked in their harsh language. "Let them run," Zelvok replied with cold amusement. "There's nothing there but dust and graves. We will finish them in the shadow of a forgotten world, and no one will ever remember that humans existed." On the Ardent Hope, the survivors felt the ship shudder as it entered the unknown planet's gravity well. Through the viewport, they could see it now, a world of endless black desert stretching beneath a starless sky. It looked like death given form, a place where hope went to die. But there was no turning back. "We have incoming fire," David shouted as red lights flashed across every console. Multiple plasma cannons locked on our position. The first blast hit the Ardent Hope like the fist of an angry god. The ship spun wildly as crew members were thrown from their feet. Sparks erupted from damaged systems, and somewhere in the lower decks, a fire began to spread. The second blast tore through the port engine, and Marcus screamed as his engineering board exploded in front of him. "We are going down," Yuki cried, fighting to control their descent. "I cannot stabilize our approach." Alara grabbed the ship-wide communicator with bloody hands. Her voice rang through every corridor and cargo bay where her people huddled in terror. "All hands, brace for impact. This is not the end. We have survived everything they threw at us, and we will survive this too. Hold on to each other. Hold on to hope." The Ardent Hope fell like a dying star toward the obsidian desert below. Wind and fire tore at the hull as they plunged through the thin traces of atmosphere. Through the bridge viewport, Alara could see the black sand rushing up to meet them, could see the end of everything humanity had ever been. But then something changed. The ground below them began to glow with a light that should not exist. Patterns appeared in the sand, massive geometric shapes that pulsed with ancient power. The light grew brighter and brighter until the whole desert seemed alive with energy. Alara had just enough time to wonder what was happening before the Ardent Hope struck the surface. The impact was thunder and chaos and darkness. Metal screamed as the ship tore itself apart. Bodies flew through corridors as everything humans had built came crashing down. And then there was silence. The Ardent Hope lay broken in a crater of black glass, smoke rising from its shattered hull. Around it, the desert had stopped glowing, but something was different now. The sand was shifting, moving as if something massive was rising from below. Deep beneath the surface, in a tomb that had waited for millions of years, ancient systems came online. Power flowed through circuits that had not fired since before the Vethkai existed. A mind older than stars stirred from its long sleep and reached out to touch the newcomers who had crashed upon its world. It sensed their pain, their fear, their desperate hope. And it recognized them. The inheritors had finally arrived, and everything was about to change. Smoke rose from the broken body of the Ardent Hope, and the survivors crawled from the wreckage like ghosts escaping their own graves. Captain Alara Vance pulled herself through a shattered viewport, her uniform torn and her face covered in blood. Around her, the black desert stretched endlessly in every direction, cold and lifeless beneath an empty sky. The air was thin but breathable, barely enough to keep them alive. Not nearly enough to give them comfort. "Sound off," she called out, her voice hoarse from the smoke. "Who is still alive?" Voices answered from across the crash site. Marcus Cole emerged from the engineering section, dragging two unconscious crew members behind him. His left arm hung at a bad angle, clearly broken, but he refused to stop moving. Dr. Yuki Tanaka organized medical teams near what remained of the cargo bay, her calm voice cutting through the chaos as she directed the wounded to safety. Lieutenant Chun and Navigator Park worked together to free trapped survivors from collapsed corridors. The numbers came in slowly, and each one was a small miracle. Of the 12,000 people aboard the Ardent Hope, over 11,000 had survived the crash. They were wounded, scared, and stranded on a dead world, but they were alive, for now. Alara looked up at the sky and saw the distant lights of the Vethkai fleet entering orbit. They had maybe 3 days before the enemy landed troops to finish what the crash had started. 3 days to find shelter, find weapons, find some way to fight back against an enemy that had already destroyed everything humanity ever built. "We need to salvage everything we can," she ordered her officers. Food, water, medical supplies, anything that still works. Set up a perimeter and prepare for. The ground shook beneath her feet. Everyone froze as a deep rumbling sound rose from below the black sand. It was not an earthquake. The vibrations had a pattern to them, a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. The sand began to shift and flow away from a point about 200 meters from the crash site, revealing something massive buried beneath. "What is that?" Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Metal emerged from the desert, not the rusted metal of some forgotten ruin, but gleaming alloy that shone with an inner light. The structure rose higher and higher, pushing aside mountains of black sand as if they weighed nothing. It was a ship, Alara realized with growing shock. A warship of impossible size, kilometers long from bow to stern. Its hull was covered in symbols that seemed to move and flow like living things, patterns that hurt the eyes if you stared at them too long. The survivors stood in stunned silence as the ancient vessel finished its emergence. It towered over the wreckage of the Ardent Hope, like a god standing over an ant, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Then a doorway opened in its side, and light poured out onto the black sand. Alara felt something touch her mind, not painfully, but gently, like a hand reaching out in the darkness. A voice spoke to her, though no sound reached her ears. It spoke in English, perfect and clear, but also somehow in every other language humanity had ever known. "We have waited for you. We knew you would come. The inheritors have arrived." The voice echoed through the minds of every human present, and many fell to their knees in shock. Yuki grabbed Alara's arm, her face pale but her eyes burning with curiosity. "Captain, that signal, it is coming from inside that ship. It is not a recording. Something in there is alive." Alara looked at the glowing doorway and made her decision. She straightened her torn uniform, wiped the blood from her face, and started walking toward the ancient vessel. Marcus and Yuki fell into step beside her, and together they crossed the threshold into the unknown. The interior of the ship took their breath away. Corridors stretched in every direction, lit by soft lights that responded to their movement. The walls were covered in murals depicting scenes that made no sense: stars being born, galaxies forming, life spreading across 1,000,000 worlds. The technology around them hummed with power that made the Ardent Hope look like a child's toy. They followed the pull in their minds until they reached a massive chamber at the heart of the vessel. In the center stood a pillar of pure light, and within that light, a presence waited. "I am the Warden," the voice said, speaking directly into their thoughts. "I am the guardian of this vessel, the keeper of the legacy. For 60 million years I have waited here, watching the galaxy, searching for those worthy of what we built." Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Who built you? Who were you waiting for?" "We called ourselves the first ones, though others named us the ancients. We were the beginning of intelligent life in this galaxy, the first to look at the stars and dream of touching them. We built civilizations that spanned 100,000 systems. We unlocked the secrets of reality itself." The light pulsed, and images flooded their minds, visions of a golden age when the ancients ruled the cosmos. They saw cities made of light, ships that sailed between dimensions, beings of pure thought dancing among the stars. "But we grew beyond the need for physical form," the Warden continued. "We transcended, became something new, something that could not stay in this reality. Before we left, we seeded life across the galaxy. We planted the seeds of 1,000,000 species, hoping that one day, one of them would prove worthy of our legacy." "The Vathkai," Marcus said suddenly, his voice hard. "You created them too?" "Yes," the Warden admitted, and there was sorrow in the ancient voice. "The Vathkai were our first chosen. We gave them knowledge, gave them power, gave them everything we had. But they became corrupted by conquest. They used our gifts to dominate and destroy. When we saw what they had become, we locked away our greatest weapons and hid them across the galaxy. We programmed vessels like this one to wait for a worthier species. Yuki looked around at the incredible technology surrounding them. And you chose us. Why? We were losing. We were almost extinct. That is exactly why we chose you, the warden replied. We watched as the Vethkai hunted you across the stars. We saw your worlds burn, your people die. Any other species would have surrendered, would have accepted extinction as their fate. But humanity kept fighting. You kept hoping, kept dreaming, kept refusing to give up even when all logic said you should. The light grew brighter, and Alara felt warmth spread through her body. We did not want conquerors to inherit our legacy. We wanted survivors. We wanted dreamers. We wanted a species that understood what it meant to suffer and still choose hope. You are flawed, fragile, and broken, and you are worthy. Alara looked at Marcus and Yuki, saw the tears running down their faces. She thought of the 11,000 survivors outside, huddled in the wreckage of their last ship, waiting for death to come. What do we do now? She asked. Now you claim your inheritance. This vessel, the Prometheus Ascendant, is yours. Its weapons, its shields, its knowledge, all of it belongs to humanity now. But there is more. The warden showed them a signal waiting to be activated. Send this across the galaxy, and you will awaken 11 other vessels like this one, hidden on forgotten worlds. Other humans who escaped the Vethkai will find them and claim them. You will no longer be alone. And the Vethkai, Alara asked, what will they do? They will come for you with everything they have. They will try to destroy you before you can claim your full power. Alara smiled, and it was not a gentle smile. Then let them come. She reached out and activated the signal. The signal raced across the galaxy at speeds that should have been impossible, carrying with it the promise of rebirth and the warning of war. Captain Alara Vance stood on the command bridge of the Prometheus Ascendant, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something other than despair. The bridge was vast, designed for beings far larger than humans, but holographic interfaces adjusted themselves to her height and responded to her touch. Screens displayed star maps showing regions of space humanity had never explored, weapon systems that could tear holes in reality, and shield generators that bent the laws of physics. This is real, she whispered to herself. This is actually happening. The warden's presence filled the bridge like a gentle warmth. It is real, Captain Vance. And there is much work to be done before the enemy arrives. Outside the ship, the survivors of the Ardent Hope were being brought aboard. Medical bays that operated on principles humans could not understand healed wounds in minutes. Food synthesizers created meals from raw energy. Quarters designed for comfort welcomed families who had spent months crammed into cargo holds. For the first time since Earth burned, the refugees found something like peace. But Alara knew the peace would not last. In the engineering section, Marcus Cole stood frozen before a console that displayed the ship's power systems. His broken arm had been healed by medical technology that seemed like magic, and now his hands trembled as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The power source, he said when Alara found him. It is not a reactor, Captain. It is a captured piece of a dying star, held in perfect stasis. The energy output is beyond anything I can calculate. We could power every human city that ever existed for 1 billion years and never run out. Alara placed a hand on his shoulder. Can you operate it? The ship is teaching me, Marcus replied with wonder in his voice. It is feeding information directly into my mind, showing me how everything works. I understand things now that would have taken a lifetime to learn. But Captain, I need to warn you about the weapons. He pulled up a display showing the Prometheus Ascendant's offensive capabilities. Alara felt her blood run cold. "These are not weapons like anything we have ever used," Marcus explained. "This one here unravels matter at the quantum level. Anything it hits simply stops existing. This one opens temporary rifts in space-time and shunts targets into dimensions where the laws of physics do not allow matter to survive. And this one," he paused, shaking his head in disbelief. "This one generates a field that reverses causality in a localized area. It makes things unhappen. The ancients built weapons to end wars, not fight them," the warden said, its voice filling the room. "They believed that true power meant never having to use it. Unfortunately, the Vethkai did not share that philosophy." In the medical bay, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was experiencing her own revelation. The ancient healing technology had shown her things about biology, about the human body, about the nature of life itself that made everything she had learned in medical school seem like children's drawings. "I can cure anything," she told Alara when the captain came to check on the wounded. "Cancer, genetic disorders, cellular decay, the ship has treatments for all of it. But there is more." She pulled up a display showing complex biological data. The ancients found a way to extend life almost indefinitely. Not immortality, but close. Humans could live for thousands of years without aging. "That knowledge is part of your inheritance," the warden confirmed. The ancients believed that wisdom required time. They wanted their chosen successors to have the years needed to grow beyond their limitations. Alara absorbed this information with a strange mixture of joy and grief. They had found the answer to so many of humanity's problems: death, disease, scarcity, and they had found it only after almost everything had been lost. Earth was gone. Billions were dead. All that remained were 12,000 survivors on a ship built by gods. She made her way to the observation deck, a massive chamber with transparent walls that looked out at the black desert and the stars beyond. The Vethkai fleet was visible now, a swarm of red lights circling the planet like vultures waiting for their prey to die. "How long do we have?" she asked the warden. 2 days before they breach the atmosphere. They are gathering their full strength for a final assault. Supreme Hierarch Zelvok has called for every available ship in this sector. They are afraid, Alara realized. They sensed the signal. They know what we found. The Vethkai have legends about the weapons of the ancients. They remember what happened to those who opposed the first ones before they transcended. That memory is the only thing in this galaxy that the Vethkai truly fear. Lieutenant David Park found Alara on the observation deck, his face showing a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. He had spent the past day learning the ship's tactical systems, and what he had discovered changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. "Captain, I have good news and complicated news," he reported. "The good news is that I think I can operate the weapons well enough to defend us. The targeting systems adapt to the user. They're already starting to predict my intentions." "And the complicated news?" David hesitated. "The ship is not just responding to my commands. It is also responding to something else, to the will of everyone aboard." The warden explained that the Prometheus Ascendant was designed to be crewed by thousands. Every person contributes to its operation, even if they do not realize it. The ship reads our collective determination, our hope, our refusal to give up. It draws power from human will itself. Alara stared at him. "Are you saying the ship is stronger because we want to survive?" "That is exactly what I am saying. The ancients built a weapon that runs on hope." A message crackled through the ship's communication system, a transmission from the Vethkai fleet. Supreme Hierarch Zelvok's harsh voice filled the bridge, translated into human language by the ship's systems. "Vermin," he spat. "You have found one of the forbidden vessels. It does not matter. The Vethkai have conquered 1,000 species, destroyed 1,000,000 worlds. Whatever power you have discovered, we will take it from you. Surrender now, and I will grant you quick deaths. Resist, and I will make your end last for generations." Alara walked to the command console and opened a channel to respond. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Supreme Hierarch, my name is Alara Vance, and I am the captain of the Prometheus Ascendant. You killed my world. You murdered my people. You have spent 300 years trying to wipe humanity from existence." She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "You should have tried harder. Now we have the weapons of gods, and we are not going anywhere. You want this ship? Come and take it. But know this, every one of your soldiers who sets foot on this vessel will die. Every ship you send against us will burn. And when the battle is over, we will hunt the Dominion across the galaxy until justice is done." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "Battle stations. Let them see what humanity can do." The sky burned red as 300 Vethkai warships descended upon the Black Desert, and Supreme Hierarch Zelvok savored what he believed would be his greatest victory. From the bridge of the Eternal Hunger, he watched his fleet spread across the horizon like a tide of death. Plasma cannons charged with enough power to crack continents. Dropships carrying millions of shock troops prepared to launch. This was the full might of the Vethkai Dominion brought to bear against the last vermin of a dying species. "All ships, open fire," Zelvok commanded. "Leave nothing but ash." The bombardment began. Hundreds of plasma beams streaked through the thin atmosphere, converging on the Prometheus Ascendant with enough firepower to shatter a moon. The ancient ship sat motionless on the black sand, its massive form dwarfing the wreckage of the Ardent Hope beside it. Every Vethkai gunner targeted the vessel that their legends called the End of Empires. The plasma struck and vanished. No explosion, no impact. The weapon's fire simply ceased to exist as it approached the ancient hull, absorbed by shields that bent space itself around the ship. Zelvok stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His fleet had just unleashed enough destruction to level a planet, and the human vessel had not even bothered to move. "Increase power to all weapons," he screamed. "Keep firing." On the bridge of the Prometheus Ascendant, Captain Alara Vance watched the assault with grim satisfaction. The shield displays did not even flicker. The Vethkai were throwing everything they had at an enemy they could not scratch. "The shields can maintain this level of protection indefinitely," the warden reported. "The enemy cannot harm us from range." "Then, why are they still firing?" Marcus asked from his engineering station. David Park answered from tactical. "They are testing us. Zelvok wants to see what we can do before he commits his ground forces. He is waiting for us to shoot back." Elara nodded. "Then let us show him. David, target their command ship." "One shot." "With pleasure, Captain." David touched the firing controls, and the Prometheus Ascendant answered. A beam of absolute darkness erupted from the bow of the ancient ship, not light, not energy, but the absence of existence itself. It crossed the distance to the Eternal Hunger in the space between heartbeats. The Vethkai flagship simply disappeared. One moment it was there, kilometers of armored hull, thousands of crew, the pride of the Dominion fleet. The next moment there was nothing, not even debris. The ship had not been destroyed. It had been erased, unmade at the fundamental level of reality. Supreme Hierarch Zelvok survived only because he had transferred his flag to another vessel moments before. He stared at the empty space where his command ship had been, and for the first time in his ancient life, he felt true terror. But the Vethkai were not a species that knew how to retreat. "All ships advance," Zelvok ordered, his voice shaking with rage. "Launch boarding parties. If we cannot destroy them from afar, we will take that ship from within." Thousands of dropships poured from the Vethkai fleet, each one carrying hundreds of armored warriors. They came in waves, accepting horrific losses as the Prometheus Ascendant's weapons erased dozens of vessels with each shot. But there were too many, moving too fast, coming from every direction. The ancient ship's weapons could not track them all. The first boarding craft crashed through the outer hull. HFY shock troops poured into the corridors of the Prometheus Ascendant, massive insectoid warriors with 4 arms, armored carapaces, and eyes filled with hatred. They had conquered 1,000 species with nothing but claws and determination. These vermin would be no different. But these vermin were ready. Marcus Cole stood at a junction point with a weapon he had learned to fire only hours ago, an ancient rifle that turned matter into energy. Behind him cowered 50 civilians, families with children, people who had never held a weapon in their lives. When the first HFY rounded the corner, Marcus did not hesitate. The weapon hummed, and the warrior vanished in a flash of light. "Come on," Marcus roared, firing again and again. "You want them? You go through me first." Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had set up a medical station in a cargo bay, treating wounded defenders while plasma fire scorched the walls around her. When a HFY breached her perimeter, she grabbed an ancient sidearm and put 3 shots through its head before returning to her patients. Lieutenant Chen led a team of engineers in a fighting retreat through the reactor section, using their knowledge of the ship's systems to trap enemies in containment fields and seal them behind blast doors. They were not soldiers, but they learned fast. David Park commanded the tactical response from the bridge, directing human teams through the ship's communication network. He watched his people die on security feeds, watched them fight with desperate courage against enemies twice their size. And he watched them win. A schoolteacher named Maria Santos held a corridor alone for 8 minutes, buying time for 300 civilians to escape. She had never fired a weapon before today. When reinforcements finally reached her, they found her standing over the bodies of 11 HFY warriors. Her hands burned from an overheating rifle, her eyes blazing with fury. "They are not so scary," she said simply. "They bleed just like us." In the lower decks, a group of children had been cornered by a HFY hunting party. The warriors clicked with amusement at the easy prey until a maintenance worker named James Park stepped between them and the kids. He was nobody special, just a man who fixed broken pipes and cleaned filters. He had found an ancient blade in a weapons locker, and he did not know how to use it. He used it anyway. James killed 3 HFY before they brought him down. His sacrifice bought enough time for security teams to arrive and evacuate the children. His name would be remembered long after this day was over. The battle raged for hours, and humanity paid for every meter of their ship in blood. But for every human who fell, 10 HFY died. The invaders had expected terrified refugees. Instead, they found warriors who had nothing left to lose. On the bridge, Alara received reports of casualties and victories, of heroes who gave everything and survivors who kept fighting. The HFY were being pushed back, their boarding parties cut off and destroyed, their momentum broken against human determination. "They are retreating," David reported with exhausted triumph. "The remaining boarding parties are falling back to their ships." Status of the enemy fleet: down to 63 vessels. "They cannot break our shields, and they cannot hold ground inside the ship." "Captain, I think we actually won." But Alara was looking at her tactical display, at a signal coming from the edge of the system. Her eyes went wide, and she began to laugh, a sound of joy and relief and fierce pride. "We did more than win," she said. "Look." On the display, 11 new signatures appeared, emerging from jump space. 11 vessels identical to the Prometheus Ascendant, crewed by human survivors from hidden colonies across the galaxy. The signal had reached them. The other inheritors had awakened. The HFY fleet saw the approaching ships and finally broke. They fled toward open space, desperate to escape the trap they had sprung on themselves. Humanity was no longer alone, and the war had just begun. The Vethkai fleet scattered like insects fleeing a fire, and for the first time in 300 years, humanity watched their enemies run. Captain Elara Vance stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Ascendant, surrounded by her wounded but victorious crew. Through the viewports, she could see the 11 other ancient vessels taking formation around her ship, a fleet of gods, crewed by the survivors of a species that refused to die. Each ship carried humans who had hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy, refugees who had lived in fear for generations, waiting for a day that most believed would never come. That day had arrived. "Captain, we are receiving hails from the other vessels," Lieutenant Chen reported, his voice thick with emotion. "They want to speak with you." "Put them through." Faces appeared on the bridge display, men and women from a dozen different colony worlds, each one commanding a ship identical to the Prometheus Ascendant. There was an old woman with steel-gray hair who introduced herself as Admiral Keiko Yamamoto of the Rising Dawn. A young man with burn scars across his face commanded the Defiant Star from what had once been the mining colonies of Epsilon Eridani. A husband and wife team led the Last Light, their vessel crewed by the descendants of a generation ship that had escaped the fall of Mars. These were the captains of humanity's new fleet, and every one of them was weeping. "We thought we were the last," Admiral Yamamoto said, her voice breaking. "We hid for so long, believing that everyone else was dead. And then the signal came, and our ship awakened, and we knew we were not alone." "None of us are alone anymore," Elara replied. "The ancients chose us, all of us, because we never stopped fighting, because we never lost hope. Now we have the power to take back everything that was stolen from us." "What do we do now?" the young man from Epsilon Eridani asked. "The Vethkai still control most of the galaxy. They have thousands of ships, billions of warriors. Even with these vessels, can we really defeat them?" Before Elara could answer, the warden's presence filled the communication channel, speaking to all 12 captains at once. "The weapons you now command were designed to end the reign of tyrants. Each vessel in your fleet carries enough firepower to challenge an entire armada. Together, you represent a force that has not existed in this galaxy for 60 million years. The Vethkai conquered through fear and numbers. You will liberate through hope and unity." Marcus Cole stepped forward, his engineering displays showing data from all 12 ships. "The warden is right. I have been analyzing our combined capabilities. These vessels can coordinate their attacks across light years, share power and resources, even combine their weapons for strikes that could crack worlds. The Vethkai have nothing that can stand against us when we work together. But we do not need to crack worlds," Dr. Yuki Tanaka added. "The ancients gave us more than weapons. They gave us the technology to heal, to rebuild, to create. When this war is over, we can restore what was lost. We can make new homes on worlds the Vethkai never touched. Humanity does not have to just survive, we can thrive." Elara felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders, heavier than ever before. She was no longer just the captain of a refugee ship. She was the leader of humanity's resurrection. The decision she made now would shape the future of her entire species. She opened the channel to all 12 vessels, her voice reaching every human who had inherited the legacy of the ancients. "Listen to me, all of you. I know you are tired. I know you have lost people you loved. I know that part of you just wants to find a safe corner of the universe and hide. But we cannot do that. We cannot rest while the Vethkai still rule the galaxy. They will never stop hunting us, never accept that we have the right to exist. If we do not end this war, it will follow us forever." She paused, letting her words sink in. The ancients waited 60 million years for a species worthy of their legacy. They watched the Vethkai corrupt the gifts they had been given. They could have destroyed the Dominion themselves before they transcended, but they chose not to. Do you know why? Because they wanted us to do it. They wanted humanity to prove that we deserved our inheritance by fighting for it. Alara looked at the stars beyond the viewport, billions of lights scattered across the infinite darkness, each one representing a world that could harbor life, harbor a hope, harbor the future. We are going to take back the galaxy. Not through conquest, not through domination, but through liberation. Every species the Vethkai have enslaved will be freed. Every world they have burned will be remembered. And when we finally reach their homeworld, we will give them the same choice they gave us: surrender or die. A roar of approval came from every ship in the fleet. Humans cheered and wept and embraced each other, finally believing that the nightmare might actually end. But Alara was not finished. She opened a channel on all frequencies, broadcasting across every communication band in the system. She knew the retreating Vethkai would hear her. She wanted them to. Supreme Hierarch Zelvok, I know you are listening. I want you to deliver a message to your Dominion. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them that humanity found the weapons of the ancients. Tell them that we are no longer refugees. We are the inheritors. Her voice grew harder, colder, filled with 300 years of accumulated grief and rage. You burned Earth. You killed billions of our people. You called us vermin and hunted us like animals. But we survived. We endured. And now we have the power to make you pay for every atrocity you ever committed. Run back to your masters, Hierarch. Tell them that humanity remembers. Tell them that we are coming for them. And tell them that nothing in this galaxy will stop us until justice is done. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Their faces shone with determination and hope, the same hope that had kept humanity alive through centuries of darkness. In the great hall of the Prometheus Ascendant, the survivors gathered one final time. 11,000 humans stood beneath banners bearing symbols they did not yet understand, surrounded by technology that had been ancient when their ancestors were still learning to make fire. They had come so far, lost so much, and somehow found a future worth fighting for. The warden's voice filled the hall, gentle and proud. Children of Earth, you have proven yourselves. You have faced extinction and refused to yield. You have earned the inheritance we set aside for you. The weapons are yours. The knowledge is yours. The stars themselves are yours. Now rise and claim your destiny. Captain Alara Vance stood before her people, the first among equals, the leader of a species reborn. She thought of everyone who had died to bring them here, her parents who fell defending Earth, her siblings who burned on the colony worlds, the countless millions who sacrificed everything so that 12,000 could survive. She would not let their deaths be meaningless. This is not the end of our story, she declared. This is just the beginning. We have spent 300 years running. Now it is time to fight, not just for survival, but for every world the Vethkai conquered, for every species they enslaved, for the galaxy they stole. She pointed toward the stars visible through the great windows. That is our future. That is our birthright. The ancients believed in us. They gave us everything we need to win. All we have to do is be worthy of their faith. Can we do that? 12,000 voices answered as one, a roar that shook the walls and echoed across the void. Yes, Alara smiled a real smile, filled with hope and fire and the promise of tomorrow. Then let us go take back the stars. The fleet of the inheritors turned toward the darkness, and humanity's greatest journey began.